The candles had burned low in the council chamber by the time Kael Nightborne finally dismissed the elders. Their voices still echoed in his mind as he walked the empty corridors of the stronghold, each footstep deliberate, controlled. Marmon Brock had been particularly insistent tonight. The old wolf had leaned across the table, his scarred hands flat against the dark wood, and spoken words that felt more like accusations than advice. An Alpha King without an heir is a throne waiting to be challenged. Kael had given no visible reaction. He never did. 7 years of ruling had taught him that much. But beneath his skin, beneath the careful mask of authority, something had tightened in his chest. Because Marmon was not wrong. The mate bond had existed between him and Elara for 3 years now. 3 years of proximity, of quiet dinners and shared responsibilities, of moments where their hands would brush and lightning would arc through his veins. 3 years of a bond that hummed constantly beneath his consciousness, but never fully settled. Never claimed. Never spoken aloud. Kael turned down the eastern wing, where Elara's chambers lay. He told himself he was simply ensuring she had returned safely from the healing house. Valerie Finch had mentioned earlier that Elara had seemed distant lately, distracted. It was his responsibility as Alpha King to ensure his Luna was well. That was all. He did not acknowledge the way his pace quickened as he approached her door, did not examine why his heartbeat had accelerated, why the bond suddenly felt stretched thin and fragile in his chest. The door was slightly ajar. Kael stopped. Elara never left her door open. She was private by nature, guarded in ways that had always made him wonder what she was protecting herself from, or perhaps protecting others from knowing. He pushed the door open slowly. Elara. The room was dim, lit only by the dying fire in the hearth. The air smelled of lavender and old parchment, since he had come to associate with her. But something else hung in the atmosphere now, something sharp and metallic that made his wolf rise instantly to attention. Fear. Then he saw her. Elara lay collapsed on the floor near the hearth, one arm stretched toward the dying flames, the other clutched against her chest. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid and spilled across the stone floor like ink. She was utterly still. The carefully constructed control Kael had maintained all evening shattered. He was beside her in an instant, dropping to his knees, his hands hovering over her body before he forced himself to think, to assess. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Her skin was pale but warm, no blood, no visible injury. But her fingers were clenched tight around something. A piece of parchment, old and yellowed, the edges brittle with age. Kael's entire world narrowed to that single piece of paper. He knew that parchment, knew the weight of it, the exact shade of cream it had been when fresh. He had held it himself once, years ago, when his hand had been steadier and his conscience less burdened. No, not this, not now. Elara, his voice came out rougher than he intended. He touched her face, gently turning her head toward him. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Elara, can you hear me? Nothing. The bond between them pulsed erratically, like a drumbeat struggling to find its rhythm. He had felt it stutter before, felt her withdraw into herself when the weight of being Luna grew too heavy. But this was different. This felt like something breaking. Kael made himself look at the letter in her hand. He recognized his own handwriting immediately. The careful script he had used in his first year as Alpha King, when every document had felt like a test of his legitimacy. When he had believed that firm decisions and unwavering authority were the only things that mattered. When he had been so terribly, irreversibly wrong. His hand shook as he carefully pried her fingers open. She did not resist. Her hand fell limp to her side as he pulled the letter free and unfolded it with a care that bordered on reverence. Or dread. The first lines confirmed what he already knew. By order of Alpha King Kael Nightborne, let it be known that Lyra Moonvei, sister to the Moonvei bloodline, is hereby exiled from the Nightborne territory for crimes against pack stability and emotional discord deemed dangerous to the collective harmony of our people. Lyra Moonvei, Elara's sister. Kael closed his eyes. The letter felt like it weighed more than stone in his hands. "No," he whispered. "No, you were never supposed to find this." He had signed that order 4 years ago, 6 months before Elara had arrived at the stronghold as part of a diplomatic arrangement between the Nightborne and Moonvei pacts. He had been 23 years old, newly crowned after his father's sudden death, drowning in council pressures and political machinations he barely understood. Lyra Moonvei had been labeled unstable by the council, dangerous, a wolf whose emotions ran too hot, whose grief over her own mate's death had manifested in ways the elders deemed threatening. Ralph Turlow had presented the case. Risno Finch had seconded it. A dozen other voices had echoed the same refrain. Exile her before she destroys others with her pain. And Kael, desperate to prove he could lead, desperate to show strength when he felt only uncertainty, had signed the order. He had told himself it was necessary. That one life weighed against the stability of hundreds was a simple calculation, that an Alpha King did not have the luxury of sentiment. He had been a fool. Worse, he had been a coward. Because when Elara had arrived months later, quiet and composed and carrying grief in her eyes that she never spoke of, Kael had said nothing. When she mentioned her sister in passing, always in past tense, always with a careful blankness that suggested a wound she would not let anyone touch, Kael had stayed silent. When the mate bond had snapped into place between them during their first formal dinner together, so sudden and absolute that he had nearly dropped his glass, Kael had felt his chest constrict with something that might have been hope or might have been horror. Because how could he tell her the truth? How could he confess that he was the reason her sister was gone? That his signature had condemned Lyra to exile, to a fate unknown, to a disappearance Elara had clearly blamed on choice rather than force. So he had stayed silent, month after month, year after year. He had let Elara believe her sister had abandoned her, had let her carry that particular grief alone while he stood beside her, close enough to touch, separated by a secret that grew heavier with every passing day. The bond had never settled, because Elara had never felt safe enough to claim it. And now she knew why. "Kael." The voice came from the doorway. Valerie Finch stood there, her healer's bag already in hand, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm as she took in the scene. "She collapsed," Kael said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant. "I need you to examine her, now." Valerie moved quickly, kneeling on Elara's other side. She pressed her fingers to Elara's wrist, then her throat, checking pulse points with practiced efficiency. Her eyes flicked to the letter still clutched in Kael's hand, but she said nothing about it. "Her heartbeat is steady," Valerie said after a moment. "No fever, no sign of injury or poison. This looks like exhaustion, emotional collapse most likely." Emotional collapse. The words hit Kael like a physical blow. "Can you wake her?" "I would not recommend it yet. Her body shut down for a reason. She needs rest." Valerie looked at him directly. "Whatever happened here, Kael, her system could not handle it. Forcing her awake now might do more harm than good." Kael nodded slowly. He carefully refolded the letter and set it aside, though his hands wanted to burn it, to destroy the evidence of his greatest failure. But destroying evidence had never erased guilt. "Move her to the bed," he said. "Stay with her tonight. Send for Sarah Lambert if you need assistance. I want someone watching her at all times. And you. I will be here." Valerie's expression softened slightly. "Kael, the council will expect you at dawn for the territory reports. Derman Hobbs specifically requested your presence." "Then Derman Hobbs will be disappointed." He stood and moved to help Valerie lift Elara. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, and that wrongness of it made something crack further in his chest. Elara had always been slender, but this felt like holding a ghost, like she had been disappearing right in front of him and he had been too blind to notice. They settled her on the bed. Valerie adjusted the blankets, checked her pulse again, and finally stood. "I will prepare some tonics," she said quietly, "for when she wakes, but Kael, you should know something." He looked at her. "Whatever is wrong here, It is not something medicine can fix. Valerie left without waiting for a response. Kael pulled a chair to the bedside and sat. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in shades of amber and shadow. Elara's face looked peaceful in sleep, but he could see the faint tracks of tears on her cheeks. Old tears, ones she had shed before collapsing. How long had she known? Hours, days, weeks. How long had she carried this truth alone? The mate bond pulsed weakly between them. Kael reached out without thinking and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. He wrapped both of his hands around hers, trying to warm them, and felt the bond stir slightly in response. "I am sorry," he whispered. The words felt pathetically inadequate. "Elara, I am so sorry." She did not stir. Kael had faced down rogue pacts and territory disputes. He had navigated political treachery and assassination attempts. He had stood firm when everyone around him had counseled retreat. But sitting here, watching the only person who had ever made him feel truly seen slip away from him, he felt more helpless than he had ever been. The letter lay on the table beside him, evidence of his cowardice, proof that he had chosen political convenience over honesty, had chosen his own comfort over her right to know the truth. He had told himself he was protecting her, but he had only been protecting himself. Dawn came slowly. Gray light filtered through the windows, turning the room cold and colorless. Valerie returned with Sarah Lambert, and together they checked Elara's vital signs again. Still stable, still sleeping, still unreachable. Kael had not moved from the chair. "You should rest," Sarah said gently. She was younger than Valerie, with kind eyes that reminded Kael of his mother. "We can watch over her." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. Sarah flinched slightly, and Kael forced himself to breathe, to moderate his tone. "I will stay. If she wakes, I need to be here. And if the council summons you, then they will wait." Sarah exchanged a glance with Valerie, but neither woman argued further. They left quietly, and Kael was alone with Elara again. The hours crawled past. Morning became afternoon. Servants brought food he did not eat and water he barely touched. Messages arrived from the council chamber. Marmon Brock requesting his presence. Clovis Richmond demanding explanations. Ephraim Hobbs expressing concern about the Alpha King's extended absence. Kael ignored them all. Because none of it mattered if Elara did not wake. None of his authority or power or carefully constructed control meant anything if the one person who had ever truly mattered to him was slipping away. The bond between them felt fragile, like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. He thought about the moment it had first formed. That dinner 3 years ago, when Elara had looked at him across the table and smiled at something absurd Wyatt Conway had said. Just a simple smile, unguarded and genuine, and the bond had slammed into Kael with the force of lightning. He had felt it before, of course, knew the signs, had watched other wolves experience the mate bond, and had thought himself prepared. He had been wrong. Nothing could have prepared him for the absolute certainty that Lyra Moonvei was his, and he was hers, and that everything else in the world had suddenly rearranged itself around that singular truth. But even then, even in that moment of perfect clarity, the guilt had already been there. A shadow at the edge of his consciousness, the knowledge that he had destroyed part of her family and had never confessed it. The bond had never fully settled, because he had never deserved it. And Elara, intuitive and careful and carrying her own wounds, had felt that wrongness even if she had not known its source. Until now. The sun was setting again, when Elara finally stirred. It was subtle at first, a slight movement of her fingers, a catch in her breathing. Kael was on his feet instantly, leaning over her, his hand finding hers. "Elara." Her eyes opened slowly. They were the color of storm clouds, gray and deep and currently unfocused. She blinked several times, her gaze tracking across the ceiling before finally settling on his face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elara's eyes focused fully, and Kael watched awareness return. Watched her remember what had happened. watched the exact moment she recalled the letter, the truth, everything. Her expression did not change. That was somehow worse than tears would have been. How long? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. A full day and night. She absorbed this information without reaction. Slowly, carefully, she sat up. Kael reached to help her, but she avoided his touch with a subtle movement that felt like a knife between his ribs. The bond flickered, fragile, uncertain. Elara looked at the table beside the bed. The letter was still there, exactly where Kael had left it. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at him. When she spoke, her voice was calm, devastatingly calm. Did you always know, or did you just learn to live with it? Kael felt something inside him fracture. Because that was the question, was it not? The heart of everything. Had he been ignorant or complicit? Had he forgotten his crime or simply grown comfortable with the weight of it? I have known since the day you arrived, he said. The truth felt like broken glass in his throat. I have carried it every moment since. Elara nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. I see, she said. And somehow, those two simple words contained more pain than any accusation could have held. Elara did not cry. Kael had watched her long enough to know that she saved her tears for solitude, for moments when no one could witness her grief. Instead, she sat very still on the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing measured and controlled. She was composing herself, rebuilding the careful walls she had constructed around her emotions. Kael recognized the process because he did the same thing every time he entered the council chamber. But there was a difference between political composure and emotional survival. This was the latter. The letter, Elara said finally. Where did you keep it? In the sealed archives, the old records vault beneath the western tower. Kael remained standing, unable to sit, unable to close the distance between them without her permission. Only the Alpha King and the head archivist have access. Kathleen Mills. Yes. Elara absorbed this. I was helping Kathleen reorganize the territorial boundary records. She needed assistance with the older documents. The vault has no proper system, everything mixed together from decades of accumulated paperwork. Kael felt his chest constrict. Of course. Kathleen had mentioned needing help with the archives weeks ago. He had suggested Elara might enjoy the work, had thought it would give her something to focus on beyond her healing duties. He had handed her the key to her own devastation. I found it by accident, Elara continued. Her voice remained calm, but Kael could hear the tremor beneath it now. It was mixed in with boundary dispute resolutions from 4 years ago, just another piece of parchment with your signature. I almost set it aside without reading it. But you did not. No, she finally looked at him directly. I saw her name, Lyra, and I read it. Silence stretched between them. The bond pulsed erratically, searching for equilibrium it could not find. How long ago? Kael asked. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 21 days of knowing, of carrying this truth alone, of looking at him across dinner tables and council meetings, and pretending everything was unchanged. Why did you not confront me? Elara's lips curved slightly. It was not a smile. What would I have said? That I discovered my mate was responsible for destroying my family? That the Alpha King I serve signed the order that exiled my sister to a fate I still do not know? Yes, Kael said. Exactly that. You should have screamed it. You should have demanded answers. To what end? Elara stood slowly, testing her balance. She was steady, though Kael could see the exhaustion still pulling at her. What would your answers have changed? Would they have brought Lyra back? Would they have erased the order you signed? No, but... Then what was the purpose of confrontation? She moved to the window, putting space between them. I have watched you rule for 3 years, Kael. I have seen how the council pressures you, how they test you constantly, waiting for any sign of weakness. I know what it means to be Alpha King. That does not excuse what I did. I am not offering excuses. Elara looked out at the darkening sky. I am explaining why I chose silence, because I knew that if I confronted you... Everything would break. The bond, the pack, the fragile peace you have built, and I was not ready for that much destruction. Kael moved closer but stopped several feet away, respecting the distance she had created. You collapsed, Elara. Your body could not sustain the weight of that secret. No, she agreed softly. It could not. Tell me about Lyra. Elara was quiet for so long that Kael thought she might refuse. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of grief held too long in silence. She was 7 years older than me, brilliant and fierce and so full of life it almost hurt to be near her. When our parents died in the border raid, Lyra became everything. Mother, sister, protector. She taught me to hunt, to heal, to survive. Kael listened, each word adding weight to the guilt he already carried. When Lyra found her mate, I was happy for her. Marcus was good to her, steady and kind. They had 3 years together before the sickness took him. Elara's hands tightened on the windowsill. The grief nearly destroyed her. She howled for 7 nights straight, refused food, refused comfort. The pack healers said her wolf was dying along with her human heart. But she survived. She did, slowly, painfully. She came back to herself over months, learned to live with the whole Marcus left behind. I watched her fight for every breath, every moment of normalcy, and I was so proud of her, so relieved that she had not given up. Elara turned from the window. Her eyes were dry but haunted. Then one day she was gone. No warning, no goodbye, just a brief note saying she needed to find herself away from the pack, that she would return when she was whole again. Elara's voice cracked slightly. I believed it. I told myself Lyra was strong enough to walk that path alone, that she would come back when she was ready. But she never did. No, and after a year passed, then too, I accepted that she had chosen a different life. That whatever healing she found, it was elsewhere. It hurt, but I understood it. Grief does strange things to people. I did not blame her for needing distance. Kael felt something twist in his chest. You thought she abandoned you by choice. Yes, Elara met his gaze. Until 3 weeks ago when I learned she had no choice at all, that my sister did not leave me. She was taken from me. Exiled by order of the Alpha King for crimes I still do not fully understand. The council deemed her dangerous, Kael said. The words felt hollow. They claimed her grief was contagious, that she was destabilizing the younger wolves with her pain. Ralph Turlow presented medical reports. Risno Finch testified about incidents I never witnessed myself. They made it sound like keeping her would destroy the pack. And you believed them. I was young, desperate to prove I could lead. My father had just died, and the council was watching every decision I made, waiting for me to fail. Kael ran a hand through his hair. That is not an excuse. It is just the truth of who I was then, weak and afraid and willing to sacrifice what was right for what was easy. Elara studied him for a long moment. What did the order say she had done, specifically? Kael had memorized every word of that letter years ago. It haunted him in quiet moments, rose up when he looked at Elara and felt the mate bond hum between them. Emotional instability presenting a threat to pack cohesion. Refusal to submit to council-mandated treatment. 3 incidents of aggressive confrontation with pack members during full moon gatherings. Suspected of spreading dissent among younger wolves regarding traditional grief protocols. Grief protocols, Elara repeated softly. They exiled her for grieving incorrectly. The simplicity of that statement made Kael flinch. Yes. Elara walked slowly back to the bed and sat down. She looked smaller somehow, as if the truth had physically diminished her. Did you know she was my sister when you signed the order? No. The report listed her as Lyra Moonvei, but I did not connect it to you. I did not know you existed yet. Would it have mattered if you had? The question cut deep. Kael wanted to say yes immediately, to insist that knowing would have changed everything. But the truth was more complicated than that. I do not know, he admitted. The Kael of 4 years ago was not the man I am now. I cannot answer for who he would have been or what he would have chosen. All I know is that I carry the weight of his failures every day. Elara nodded slowly. At least you are honest about that. I owe you honesty. I should have given it to you the moment the bond formed. Why did you not? Kael moved to the chair he had occupied all night and sat, suddenly exhausted. Because I was a coward. Because I told myself I was protecting you from pain you had already learned to live with. Because every day I stayed silent made it harder to speak. Because I loved you, and I knew the truth would destroy any chance of you loving me back. The confession hung in the air between them. Elara looked at him with an expression he could not read. You loved me. I still do. Even though the bond never settled. The bond never settled because you never felt safe enough to claim it, Kael said. I understand that now. Some part of you always sensed the lie between us. Your wolf knew I was hiding something that mattered. Elara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. I fell in love with you after I found the letter. Kael's breath caught. I read the order, Elara continued. I went back to my chambers and cried for 2 days straight. Then I came to dinner that third night, and I watched you, really watched you. I saw how carefully you listened to every pack member who approached you, how you remembered names and situations, how you carried the weight of every decision without complaint. She looked down at her hands. I saw a man who had made a terrible choice when he was young and afraid, and I saw a man who had spent every day since trying to be worthy of the responsibility he carries. I saw someone who would hate himself for what he had done if he let himself feel it, and I thought, this is who my mate is, not perfect, not innocent, but trying. Kael felt something break open in his chest. Elara. That is when I knew I loved you, she said. Not despite the truth, but because of how you carried it. But I also knew I could never claim the bond. Because how could I bind myself to you when I could not forgive what you had done? When I did not know if I wanted to forgive it? You do not owe me forgiveness. I know, Elara finally looked at him again. But I owe myself the truth about what I feel, and the truth is complicated. Kael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. What happened yesterday? Why did you collapse? Elara's hand drifted to her chest, over her heart. I was rereading the letter, trying to make sense of the emotions, trying to understand if I could separate the Kael who signed that order from the Kael I have come to know. And the bond just surged, like it was trying to force itself into place. My wolf wanted to claim you, and my heart could not let it happen, and the conflict was too much. Your body could not hold both truths at once. No. The bond between them pulsed weakly. Kael could feel it searching, reaching, trying to bridge the distance, but something was still blocking it, some wound that had not yet healed. What do you need from me? He asked. Tell me what I can do to make this right. Elara shook her head slowly. There is nothing you can do, Kael. This is not something you can fix with action or apology. I need to find my own way through this. But not alone. Maybe alone is what I need right now. The words hurt more than Kael had expected. He stood, moving toward her instinctively, but stopped when she raised her hand. Please, she said softly. I need space to think, to feel, to figure out who I am now that I know the truth. Kael wanted to argue, wanted to insist that they face this together, that isolation would only make the pain worse. But he had already taken so much from her. He would not take her choice now. I will respect that, he said. But Elara, you should know something. She looked at him, waiting. The council knows you found the letter. Valerie told Sarah, and Sarah mentioned it to Clyde Haskins. By now, half the stronghold probably knows something happened. Elara's expression tightened. What will they do? I do not know yet, but they will see this as a weakness, evidence that my personal life compromises my ability to rule. Is that what you think this is? A weakness? No, Kael said firmly. This is the consequence of my own failure, but the council will not see it that way. They will see an opportunity. Elara stood, swaying slightly. Kael moved to steady her, but she waved him off. Then we both have decisions to make, she said. You about how to handle the council, me about whether I can stay here knowing what I know. The casual way she mentioned leaving felt like a physical blow. Elara. I am not making threats, Kael. I am being honest. I do not know if I can remain Luna to an Alpha King whose greatest secret is the destruction of my family. I do not know if the bond will ever settle. I do not know if love is enough when trust has been broken before it was ever fully built. She moved past him toward the door, then paused. I need time. Please give me that. Kael nodded, not trusting his voice. Elara left without looking back. Kael stood alone in her chambers, surrounded by the faint scent of lavender and the dying embers of the fire. The letter still lay on the table, its edges curled with age, his signature dark against the yellowed parchment. Evidence of the moment he had chosen wrong. Proof that some mistakes could not be unmade. Outside, the moon was rising. Kael could feel the pull of it in his blood, the call to shift and run and lose himself in instinct rather than thought. But he remained human, remained still, remained alone with the weight of what he had done and the possibility that the one person who mattered most might never be able to forgive him. The bond pulsed once weakly, then fell silent. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. Elara maintained her duties at the healing house. Kael attended council sessions and territory meetings. They moved through the stronghold like ghosts occupying the same space but existing in different dimensions, never quite touching, never quite meeting. The pack noticed. Conversations would quiet when either of them entered a room. Eyes tracked their movements with the kind of careful attention that suggested gossip spreading like wildfire through dry grass. Kael could feel the speculation in every glance, every whispered word that cut off too quickly when he walked past. But he said nothing, did nothing, waited for Elara to make the first move. On the 4th morning, she finally came to him. Kael was in his private study, reviewing boundary reports that Harlan McGraw had submitted, when the door opened without a knock. He looked up to find Elara standing in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. We need to talk, she said. Kael set down the reports immediately. Of course. Elara closed the door behind her and moved to stand by the window. The morning light caught in her dark hair, and for a moment, Kael was transported back to that first dinner 3 years ago. The way she had looked at him across the table. The way the bond had snapped into place with such certainty. How much simpler everything had seemed in that moment. I have been thinking, Elara said, breaking the silence, about what you told me, about the council and their pressure, about you being young and afraid and desperate to prove yourself. Kael waited. He had learned over the past few days that Elara needed space to find her words, and interrupting would only push her further away. I understand the position you were in, she continued. Logically, I can see how it happened. A new Alpha King, surrounded by advisors who claimed to know better, presented with evidence that seemed compelling at the time. I understand the mechanics of how you came to sign that order. But, Kael prompted gently, but understanding is not the same as acceptance, and acceptance is not the same as forgiveness. Elara turned from the window to face him. I keep trying to reconcile the Kael who signed that letter with the Kael I have come to know, and the truth is, you are both the same person. The growth does not erase the failure. The regret does not undo the action. No, Kael agreed quietly, it does not. So where does that leave us? The question hung in the air. Kael stood from his desk, but he did not move closer. He had learned that Elara needed physical distance to maintain emotional proximity. That depends on what you want, he said. I will not pressure you into claiming a bond you are not ready for. I will not ask you to forgive what you cannot yet forgive. But I also will not lie to you again. So I need you to tell me honestly what you need. Elara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but soft. I need to know if you would make the same decision again. The question cut straight to the heart of everything. Kael could have answered quickly, could have said no, never, that he would choose differently without hesitation. But Elara had asked for honesty, and simple answers would be a new kind of lie. If I were the same person I was then, he said carefully, facing the same pressures with the same limited understanding, I might make the same choice. Because that version of me believed he was doing what was necessary. Elara flinched slightly. and Kael continued before she could withdraw. But I am not that person anymore. The years between then and now have taught me that necessary and right are not always the same thing. That strength sometimes means standing alone against voices you trust. That protecting the pack does not always mean sacrificing the individual. He took a breath. So no, I would not make that choice again. Not because the circumstances were different, but because I am different. Because I have learned what it costs to choose the easy path over the right one. And that cost is you, your trust, your sister, the possibility of us ever truly being whole together. Elara's eyes shimmered, but she did not cry. You are saying you learned from your mistake. Yes. And that I should believe you have changed enough that history would not repeat itself. I am saying I hope I have changed, but I cannot prove it to you with words, only with the choices I make from this moment forward. Elara nodded slowly. She moved to the chair across from his desk and sat, a careful distance maintained between them. The council is going to demand answers, she said, changing direction. They will want to know why I collapsed, why we have been avoiding each other. Marmon and the others will use this against you. Let them. Kael. I am serious, Elara. Let them question my ability to lead. Let them demand explanations. Because the alternative is asking you to lie, and I have done enough damage with secrets already. What will you tell them? The truth. Elara looked at him sharply. You cannot. If the pack learns that you exiled my sister, that the mate bond between us exists but was never claimed because of it, it will raise questions about your judgment, about your ability to make decisions without personal feelings clouding them. Good, Kael said firmly. Those questions should be raised. I made a terrible decision 4 years ago, and the fact that it was influenced by political pressure does not absolve me of responsibility. If the pack loses faith in me because of it, then perhaps they should. You are willing to risk your position as Alpha King. I am willing to risk everything for a chance at being honest with you, with the pack, with myself. Elara studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, a softening he had not seen in days. When did you become this person? She asked quietly. The moment I realized I loved you more than I loved being right. The bond between them pulsed, stronger this time, still not settled but searching with more purpose. Elara gasped softly, her hand moving to her chest. Do you feel that? Kael asked. Yes, her voice was barely a whisper. It is trying to connect again. Because you are letting it, because some part of you wants this despite everything. Elara closed her eyes. Wanting is not the same as being ready. I know. And being ready is not the same as it being right. I know that too. They sat in silence. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Somewhere in the stronghold, the daily routines continued. But in this room, time felt suspended, held in careful balance between honesty and possibility. Finally, Elara opened her eyes. I want to hear it from you directly, not from a letter, not from second-hand accounts. I want you to tell me exactly what happened, every detail of how Lyra's exile came to be, and I want you to tell me what you know about where she is now. Kael felt his chest tighten. I do not know where she is. Then tell me what you do know. He moved around the desk and sat in the chair beside her rather than across from her. Close enough to reach if she wanted, far enough to give her space if she needed it. The council first raised concerns about Lyra 6 months after I became Alpha King. Ralph Turlow brought forward complaints from pack members. Lyra had been attending full moon gatherings and speaking openly about the inadequacy of traditional grief protocols. She argued that the pack treated mourning like a weakness, to be overcome quickly, rather than a process to be honored. She was right, Elara said softly. Yes, but the council saw it as dissent, as undermining pack cohesion during a time when stability was critical. They claimed younger wolves were beginning to question authority, to resist the structure that kept the pack functioning. And you believed them. I was surrounded by wolves who had decades more experience than me, who had advised my father and his father before him, When they presented me with testimony and reports, I did not question their validity. I should have, but I did not. Kael continued, walking through the memories he had tried to bury. Snow Finch provided medical documentation claiming Lyra was exhibiting signs of dangerous emotional instability. Harlan McGraw reported 3 separate incidents where she had confronted pack members aggressively during gatherings. The evidence seemed overwhelming. What incidents? Elara's voice was sharp now. What did she supposedly do? According to the reports, she challenged an elder about mandatory participation in pack hunts while still in mourning. She refused treatment from the pack healer for what they termed excessive grief responses. She organized private meetings with younger wolves without council approval. Elara stood abruptly. None of that is dangerous. None of that warranted exile. I know that now. Did you even investigate? Did you speak to Lyra yourself? Did you ask for her side of what happened? No, the admission felt like broken glass. I trusted the council to have done their due diligence. I signed the order based on their recommendation without ever meeting your sister face to face. Elara turned away from him, her shoulders tight. You destroyed her life without even looking her in the eye. Yes. And then you let me walk into this stronghold months later. Let me fall for you. Let me believe my sister had abandoned me when the truth was so much worse. Yes. Elara spun back to face him. For the first time since she had found the letter, there was anger in her expression. Real, raw anger that she had been holding back. How dare you, she said, her voice low and shaking. How dare you carry that secret and still accept my affection? How dare you feel the mate bond snap into place and say nothing? Every moment we spent together was built on a lie. You are right, Kael said. He did not defend himself, did not try to soften the accusation. Everything you are saying is true. I was selfish and cowardly. I chose my own comfort over your right to know, and I have no excuse for that beyond the simple fact that I did not want to lose you before I ever really had you. Well, you're losing me now. The words hit like a physical blow. Kael felt the bond stutter in his chest, felt Elara's wolf pulling away from his own. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. I do not know what I want, Elara said. Her anger was fading now, replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. I thought I knew. I thought maybe I could separate the past from the present, that maybe your growth was enough. But standing here, hearing you admit you never even spoke to her, never gave her a chance to defend herself, I just feel sick. She moved toward the door. Elara, wait. No, she did not turn around. I need space, real space, not just physical distance but actual separation. I cannot be Luna right now. I cannot stand beside you and pretend everything is manageable, because it is not, and I am tired of pretending. What are you saying? I am saying I need to leave the stronghold for a while. Go somewhere I can think without every corner reminding me of what I have lost, what we have lost. Kael stood, panic rising in his throat. For how long? I do not know. Where will you go? I do not know that either. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry, but the pain in them was devastating. All I know is that I cannot heal here, and I cannot figure out what I feel about us when you are so close. So I need to go, and you need to let me. Kael wanted to argue, wanted to beg her to stay, to give him a chance to prove he could be better. But he had already taken so much from her. Her sister, her trust, the security of a bond that should have been certain. He would not take her autonomy, too. Okay, he said. The word felt like surrender. Go, take whatever time you need. I will not stop you. Elara nodded. Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or regret, possibly both. Thank you, she said softly. She turned and left without another word. Kael stood alone in his study, listening to her footsteps fade down the corridor. The bond between them stretched thin, pulling taut as the distance grew. But it did not break. Not yet. Outside the window, clouds were gathering, a storm rolling in from the northern mountains. Kael watched the sky darken and wondered if Elara had meant what she said about not knowing what she wanted. or if she already knew and was simply being kind by not saying it aloud. Either way, the outcome felt the same. He was losing her, and there was nothing he could do but watch her walk away and hope that she might someday choose to come back. The council chamber felt colder than usual when Kael entered the next morning. Or perhaps it was simply that he had stopped pretending he belonged there. Every seat was filled. Marmon Brock sat at the head of the table opposite Kael's chair, his scarred hands folded on the dark wood. Clovis Richmond was to his right, Ephraim Hobbs to his left. Ralph Turlow, Risno Finch, Dermon Hobbs, Clyde Haskins, Harlan McGraw, and half a dozen other senior pack members formed a semicircle of judgment and expectation. They had clearly been talking before he arrived. The sudden silence when he entered told him everything he needed to know about the topic of conversation. Kael moved to his chair but did not sit. He remained standing, hands loose at his sides, meeting each wolf's gaze in turn. "Let us skip the pleasantries," he said. "I know why you called this meeting. Ask your questions." Marmon leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The Luna has not been seen in public for 3 days. When she does appear, she avoids pack gatherings. Servants report you have not shared chambers since she collapsed. So yes, Alpha King, we have questions." "Then ask them. Is it true that she discovered classified documents in the archives?" This came from Clovis Richmond, whose administrative role gave him nominal oversight of pack records. "Yes." "Documents that were sealed by your order?" "Yes." A murmur rippled through the assembled wolves. Kael let it rise and fall without interrupting. "What did these documents contain?" Ralph Turlow asked. The old healer looked genuinely concerned rather than accusatory. What could have caused the Luna to collapse? Kael had known this moment would come, had prepared himself for it. But standing here, facing wolves he respected and resented in equal measure, the words still felt like admitting to murder. 4 years ago, at the council's recommendation, I signed an exile order for Lyra Moonvei, Elara's sister. The letter detailed charges of emotional instability and dissent. Elara discovered it while helping Kathleen Mills reorganize the archives. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos. Voices erupted from multiple directions. Questions overlapped, accusations layered on top of confusion. Kael caught fragments. "You never told her." "The Luna's sister." "How did we not know this?" Marmon's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Quiet." The chamber fell silent again. Marmon studied Kael with an intensity that suggested he was reevaluating everything he thought he knew. "Let me understand this correctly," Marmon said slowly. "You exiled the Luna's sister before you ever met her. Then, when she arrived and the mate bond formed between you, you chose not to reveal this information." "That is correct." "For 3 years." "Yes." "And in all that time, the bond never fully settled." Kael felt something tighten in his chest. No, it did not. "Because she never felt safe enough to claim it," Ephraim Hobbs said. He was younger than Marmon, sharper in his assessments. "Her wolf sensed the lie even if she did not consciously know it." "That is my belief, yes." Clovis leaned forward. "This is a disaster. If word spreads that the Alpha King concealed such information from his own mate, it calls into question every decision you have made. Every judgment, every claim to authority." "I am aware." "Are you?" Risno Finch stood, his healer's instincts warring with political calculation. "Because from where I sit, you have jeopardized your position, the stability of the pack, and the Luna's well-being all for the sake of avoiding an uncomfortable conversation." "You are not wrong," Kael said. "But let us be clear about something. The council recommended Lyra Moonvei's exile. You presented the evidence. You made the case. I signed the order, yes, and I carry that responsibility fully. But I was not the only one in this room who decided her fate." The temperature in the room dropped further. Ralph Turlow shifted uncomfortably. "We acted based on the information available at the time." "As did I, and yet I am the one who chose to keep it secret. I am the one who decided protecting myself was more important than honoring the truth. So yes, the failure is mine, but the original decision belongs to all of us. Marmon's expression darkened. You are deflecting. No, I am providing context. There is a difference. Context that makes you look like a victim rather than the architect of your own problems. I am not a victim, Kael said firmly. I am someone who made a terrible choice and compounded it with cowardice, but I will not shoulder blame that belongs to this entire council simply because it is convenient for you to make me the sole villain in this story. Derman Hobbs spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried weight. Where is the Luna now? She left yesterday morning. She needed space to process what she learned. She left without protection, without escort. Ephraim looked genuinely alarmed. Alpha King, the borderlands are not safe for a lone wolf. Elara is more than capable of taking care of herself. That is not the point, Marmon said. The point is that the Luna has fled the stronghold because her own mate betrayed her trust. Do you understand how that looks? How it will be interpreted by other packs? I understand perfectly, and I do not care. The declaration stunned the room into silence. Kael met Marmon's gaze without flinching. The Luna left because she needs time to heal from wounds I inflicted. If that makes me look weak or compromised in the eyes of other packs, so be it. Her well-being matters more than political appearances. Your position as Alpha King is not just about appearances, Clovis said sharply. It is about maintaining order, demonstrating strength, proving that you can lead without being swayed by personal attachments. And what would you have me do? Kael asked. Track her down against her will, force her to return and pretend everything is acceptable. Would that demonstrate strength? Or would it simply prove that I learned nothing from the original mistake? No one answered. Kael continued, his voice steady. I made a choice 4 years ago based on fear and inexperience. I compounded that choice with years of silence. Now I am making a different choice. I am choosing honesty over convenience. I am choosing Elara's autonomy over my own comfort. If that costs me your confidence, then perhaps your confidence was never truly in me to begin with. Ralph Turlow cleared his throat. What do you intend to do if she does not return? The question hung in the air like a sword, suspended by a thread. I will respect her decision, Kael said, and I will continue to lead this pack to the best of my ability, with or without a Luna by my side. That is not sustainable, Ephraim said. An Alpha King without a settled mate bond is vulnerable. Other packs will see it as weakness. Challengers will emerge. Let them. Marmon stood abruptly. You are being reckless. No, I am being honest about my limitations, something I should have done from the beginning. Honesty without strategy is just self-destruction. And strategy without honesty is just another form of cowardice. Kael held Marmon's gaze. I have spent 3 years building my authority on a foundation of secrets. It was always going to crumble eventually. At least now it crumbles on my terms. Clovis shook his head. This is exactly what we feared when we pushed for the Exile originally. That emotional attachment would cloud your judgment. That personal feelings would compromise your ability to make hard decisions. You are right, Kael said. The agreement clearly surprised them. My feelings for Elara have absolutely compromised my judgment. They have made me question decisions I once thought were necessary. They have forced me to examine my own failures rather than hiding behind political necessity. And that compromise has made me a better Alpha King, not a worse one. That is a matter of perspective, Risno said. Everything is a matter of perspective. But I would rather rule with the perspective that individual lives matter than the perspective that they are expendable for the sake of stability. Harlan McGraw, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. What about Lyra Moonvei? Does she still live? The question cut through the political posturing like a knife. Kael felt his jaw tighten. I do not know. You exiled her and never followed up on her fate. The order required her removal from Nightborne territory. Where she went after that, what became of her, I have no information. Then you do not know if you exiled her to her death, Harlan said quietly. No, I do not. The admission felt like tearing open a wound. Kael had spent years not thinking about what happened to Lyra after she left, had convinced himself that exile was better than execution, that giving her life outside the pack was a mercy. But he had never confirmed it, never checked, never cared enough to find out if his mercy had actually saved her or simply killed her more slowly. "I will find out," Kael said. "I will send scouts to track her last known location. I will do everything in my power to learn what became of her, and if she still lives, I will offer her the chance to return if she wishes, or to have her exile officially lifted if she prefers to remain elsewhere." "And if she is dead?" Marmon asked. "Then I will live with that knowledge for the rest of my life, and I will make sure Elara knows the truth, whatever it is." The council members exchanged glances. Some looked skeptical, others looked concerned. A few looked almost sympathetic. Finally, Marmon sat back down. "The council will need to vote on whether you retain our confidence as Alpha King," he said formally. "Given the circumstances, given the concealment, given the political ramifications, we cannot simply overlook this." "I understand." "You will leave the chamber while we deliberate." Kael nodded. He had expected this, had prepared for it even. He turned and walked toward the door, back straight, head high. As he reached for the handle, Ralph Turlow's voice stopped him. "Kael." He turned. The old healer looked tired, older than his years. "For what it is worth, I believe you made the right choice in being honest. Not the easy choice, but the right one." Kael nodded once, then left the chamber. The corridor outside was empty. Kael walked until he found a window overlooking the training grounds. Younger wolves were sparring below, their movements fluid and confident. He remembered being that certain once, that sure of his place in the world. He wondered if he would ever feel that way again. An hour passed, then two. Kael remained at the window, watching the sun climb toward midday, waiting for a verdict he might not survive. Finally, the council chamber door opened. Clyde Haskins emerged and gestured for Kael to return. The assembly looked grim when he re-entered. Marmon remained standing, his expression unreadable. "The council has deliberated," Marmon said formally. "By a vote of 8-5, we have decided to maintain confidence in your leadership. However, this comes with conditions." Kael waited. "First, you will organize a search for Lyra Moonvei immediately. We need to know her fate, and Elara deserves that closure." "Agreed." "Second, you will increase transparency in your decision-making processes. No more sealed orders without council review. No more autonomous choices on matters of pack importance." "Agreed." "Third, when the Luna returns, if she returns, the bond must settle properly. We cannot have an Alpha King whose mate bond remains unstable. It sends the wrong message." Kael felt his hands tighten into fists. "I will not force Elara into anything." "We are not asking you to force her. We are asking you to resolve the situation one way or another. Either the bond settles, or it is formally severed. No more existing in this halfway state." The words felt like a death sentence. "And if she chooses not to claim the bond?" Kael asked quietly. Marmon's expression softened slightly. "Then you will need to accept that choice and move forward, for your sake and the pack's sake." Kael nodded slowly. There was nothing else to say. The meeting adjourned. Council members filed out, some offering quiet words of support, others maintaining careful distance. Eventually, only Marmon remained. "That was brave," the old wolf said. "Stupid, perhaps, but brave." "I am tired of being careful," Kael admitted. "Careful keeps you alive." "Careful was killing me slowly. At least this way, if I fail, it will be on my own terms." Marmon studied him for a long moment. "You love her that much?" "Yes. Even if she never comes back." "Even then." Marmon nodded slowly. "Then I hope for both your sakes that she finds what she needs out there, because losing her will break you, Kael, and this pack cannot afford a broken Alpha King." He left without waiting for a response. Kael stood alone in the council chamber, surrounded by empty chairs and the ghosts of decisions past. He thought about Elara, wherever she was, thought about Lyra, whose fate he had never bothered to learn. Thought about all the ways he had failed the people who mattered most. Then he straightened his shoulders, left the chamber, and went to organize the search party. Because if he could not fix the past, at least he could try to illuminate it. Even if the truth destroyed him in the process. Elara had been walking for 2 days when the rain started. She had left the stronghold before dawn, slipping past the early watch with the ease of someone who had spent years learning to move unnoticed. Wyatt Conway had been on duty at the eastern gate. He had seen her, had opened his mouth to question her departure, but something in her expression made him step aside without a word. She was grateful for that small mercy. The borderlands stretched before her, wild and untamed. This was unclaimed territory, the spaces between pack lands where wolves who did not fit anywhere else sometimes made their homes. It was dangerous in its unpredictability, but Elara found comfort in that danger. At least here, the threats were obvious. Unlike the stronghold, where wounds came wrapped in good intentions and silence. She had no clear destination. Had simply known she needed distance, needed air that did not smell like Kael, needed ground that did not remind her of every conversation they had almost had and every truth they had almost spoken. The forest grew denser as she moved deeper into the borderlands. Ancient trees with trunks wider than 3 wolves standing shoulder to shoulder. Underbrush thick enough to hide a dozen different predators. The kind of wilderness that demanded attention, that punished carelessness. Elara welcomed it. On the second night, she made camp in a small clearing beside a stream. The water was cold and clear, probably fed by mountain snowmelt. She built a fire using skills Lyra had taught her years ago, back when they would venture into the forest together, and Lyra would make her practice survival techniques until her hands were blistered and her muscles ached. Lyra. The name felt different now. Before, it had carried the weight of abandonment, of a sister who had chosen to leave, who had decided Elara was not worth staying for. But now it carried something heavier, the weight of stolen choice, of exile disguised as desertion. Elara stared into the flames and tried to make sense of what she felt. Anger, certainly. Fury at Kael for signing the order, for hiding the truth, for letting her believe a lie that had shaped years of her life. But underneath the anger was something more complicated. Because she understood, logically, how it had happened, could see the threads of pressure and inexperience and political manipulation that had led to that moment. Understanding did not equal forgiveness. But it did not equal hatred either. Elara pulled her knees to her chest and watched sparks rise into the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound was lonely, searching. She wondered if Kael could hear it too, wherever he was. Wondered if the bond between them stretched this far, if he could feel the ache in her chest that had nothing to do with physical distance. She had told him she did not know if she could stay. Had said she needed time to think, to heal, to figure out who she was without the weight of his secret pressing down on her. But sitting here alone in the wilderness, Elara was beginning to realize that the problem was not whether she could forgive Kael. The problem was whether she could forgive herself for loving him anyway. Because that was the truth she had been avoiding. The confession she had made in Kael's study had been real. She had fallen in love with him after finding the letter, had looked at the man who had destroyed part of her family and felt her heart open anyway. What did that say about her? Was it weakness, betrayal of Lyra's memory, or was it something else entirely, something that acknowledged pain without being defined by it? Elara did not know. The rain started sometime after midnight. Soft at first, then building to a steady downpour that soaked through her clothes and turned the ground to mud. She should have sought better shelter, should have moved to higher ground. But she stayed by the dying fire, letting the rain wash over her, feeling oddly clean despite being drenched. By dawn, she was shivering. Elara forced herself to stand, to gather her supplies, to keep moving. Staying still would only make the cold worse. She needed to find shelter, needed to dry her clothes and warm her body before hypothermia became a real concern. She walked for hours, barely paying attention to direction. The rain continued, relentless. Her muscles ached. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges. She should stop, should rest, should take care of herself the way she took care of others at the healing house. But stopping meant thinking, meant facing the tangle of emotions she had been outrunning, so she kept walking. It was late afternoon when she heard footsteps behind her. Elara spun, her body tensing instinctively. Through the rain and mist, a figure emerged from the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the careful precision of someone tracking prey. Kael. Of course it was Kael. He stopped about 10 feet away, hands raised slightly in a gesture of non-aggression. He was soaked through, his dark hair plastered to his skull, his clothes mud-stained. He looked exhausted. Good, she hoped tracking her had been hell. "I am not here to bring you back," he said. His voice was rough, probably from the cold. "I am not here to convince you or pressure you or make promises I cannot keep." "Then why are you here?" "Because you have been walking in circles for the past 6 hours, and you are heading straight toward a ravine that floods in heavy rain. Because I could feel your exhaustion through the bond and knew you were not taking care of yourself. Because I needed to know you were safe before I let you go." Elara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she did not need his protection, did not want his concern. But the truth was, she had been walking aimlessly, had not noticed the subtle changes in terrain that indicated danger ahead. "How did you find me?" she asked instead. "The bond. It has always been strong enough to track, even if it never settled. You followed me for 2 days. I stayed far enough back to give you space, but yes, I followed." Elara felt something twist in her chest, part anger, part something that might have been gratitude. She was too tired to untangle which emotion was winning. "You need to get out of this rain," Kael continued. "There is a hunting shelter about 1/2 mile west. It is old but weatherproof. You can dry off, warm up, rest properly." "And then what? You escort me back to the stronghold like a wayward child." "No, then I leave. I give you the space you asked for, but I need to know you are not going to collapse out here alone. I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Kael's expression softened, "but you should not have to, not because of wounds I inflicted." The words hit harder than Elara expected. She swayed slightly, and Kael moved forward instinctively. She raised a hand to stop him. "Do not." He froze. "I came out here to get away from you," Elara said. Her voice shook, whether from cold or emotion she could not tell. "To have space to think without you constantly present. And now you are here, and I am so angry I can barely breathe. But I am also relieved. And I hate that I am relieved. I hate that part of me wanted you to follow even though I told you not to." Kael said nothing, just stood there in the rain, waiting. "Why?" Elara asked. "Why do you care this much?" "Because I love you. Because the thought of you hurting, alone, cold, possibly in danger, was more than I could bear. Because even if you never forgive me, even if you walk away and never come back, I need to know you are safe. That is not negotiable. You do not get to decide what I need." "No, but I get to decide what I do. And I decided I would rather face your anger than spend another moment wondering if you were okay." Elara felt tears mix with rain on her face. "You are making this harder." "I know, I am sorry." "Stop apologizing." "I cannot, not when I have so much to apologize for." Elara looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the exhaustion etched into his features, the worry in his eyes, the way he held himself carefully still to avoid spooking her. Saw the man who had made a terrible choice years ago and had been living with the consequences ever since. Saw the man she loved, despite every rational reason not to. "I accused you of loving redemption more than me," she said quietly. "You were not entirely wrong." "Was I not?" Kael shook his head. "I love you, Elara, not the idea of you, not what you represent or what forgiving me would mean for my conscience. I love the way you listen to pack members like their problems actually matter. I love how you always smell like lavender. I love that you cry in private because you think showing emotion is weakness when really it is the strongest thing you do. I love you, completely, imperfectly, without conditions." The bond between them flared. strong and sudden, searching for connection. Elara gasped, her hand going to her chest. "Do you feel that?" Kael asked. "Yes. That is your wolf, my wolf, trying to complete what should have happened 3 years ago, but I will not force it. I will not pressure you. If you want me to walk away right now, I will. If you want me to leave the borderlands entirely, never track you again, give you complete freedom, I will do that too. And if I want you to stay." Kael's expression shifted, hope carefully restrained. "Then I will stay as long as you want me to." Elara closed her eyes. The rain was slowing now, tapering off to a drizzle. Around them, the forest smelled of wet earth and pine. She could hear the stream nearby, swollen from the storm. She thought about Lyra, about the sister who had been taken from her, whose fate remained unknown, about the years of believing abandonment when the truth had been exile. She thought about Kael, about the young Alpha King who had made a choice he could not unmake, about the man he had become in the years since, shaped by guilt and responsibility and the slow work of trying to be better. She thought about herself, about the Luna who had chosen silence for 3 weeks rather than confrontation, who had collapsed under the weight of truth she could not voice, who had run rather than stay and face what was broken between them. They were all flawed, all carrying wounds, all trying to navigate pain they had not asked for. Maybe that was enough. Maybe acknowledging the brokenness was the first step toward healing. Maybe love did not require perfection, only honesty about the imperfections. Elara opened her eyes. "The hunting shelter," she said. "Take me there." Kael moved immediately, closing the distance between them. He did not touch her, just gestured for her to follow. They walked in silence through the thinning rain, Kael leading the way around obstacles, Elara following with muscles that screamed in protest. The shelter was exactly as he described, old but solid, with a slanted roof that had kept the interior mostly dry. There was even a small supply of firewood stacked in one corner, left by some previous occupant. Kael built a fire with efficiency born of practice. Within minutes, flames were crackling, spreading warmth through the small space. Elara moved closer to the heat, her body shaking as feeling returned to her cold-numbed extremities. Kael removed his wet jacket and hung it on a makeshift hook. He did not suggest Elara do the same, did not offer unsolicited advice, just tended the fire and gave her space to exist without expectation. After a long silence, Elara spoke. "I need you to answer something honestly. Anything. If I cannot forgive you, if the bond never settles properly, will you resent me for it?" Kael looked at her directly. "No." "How can you be sure?" "Because my failure is not your responsibility to fix. Whatever you decide, it will be the right decision for you, and I will accept it without resentment. Even if it means losing me. Even then." Elara nodded slowly. "What if I told you I think I can forgive you, but I am terrified of what that means? That maybe I am betraying Lyra by letting you off the hook too easily. I would tell you that forgiveness is not about me. It is about you choosing not to carry anger that will poison you from the inside, and that loving me does not betray Lyra any more than hatting me would honor her. You are allowed to hold complicated feelings about complicated situations. When did you become so wise?" "When I finally stopped running from my own failures." Elara pulled her knees to her chest, staring into the fire. The warmth was starting to seep into her bones, easing the ache that had nothing to do with cold. "The council voted to keep you as Alpha King," she said. It was not a question. Kael raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "Because you are here. If they had removed you, you would not have the authority to send search parties or track wayward Lunas. You would be too busy fighting to reclaim your position. They voted to keep me, barely, with conditions." "What conditions?" "That I find Lyra, that I increase transparency, and that the bond between us either settles or is formally severed." Elara's chest tightened. "They are forcing your hand." "They are forcing reality. We cannot exist in this halfway state forever. Eventually, we have to choose." "And if I choose wrong?" "There is no wrong choice, Elara. Only the choice you make and the life you build from it." She looked at him then, really looked, saw the man who had tracked her through rain and wilderness not to control her but to ensure her safety, who had confessed his failures to an entire council without deflection, who was sitting here now, giving her space even as the bond between them pulled and ached. "I do not want to lose you," she whispered. "Then do not. But I do not know if I can claim the bond yet. I do not know if I am ready for that level of commitment when so much is still unresolved. Then we take it slow, we figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations, just two people trying to navigate something neither of us fully understands." Elara felt tears finally fall, warm against her cold cheeks. "Why are you being so patient with me?" "Because you deserve patience. Because love that requires you to heal on someone else's timeline is not really love. And because I would rather have you in my life incomplete than lose you entirely trying to force something you are not ready for." The bond flared again, not settling, not quite, but stronger than it had been, searching with more purpose. Elara closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The connection between them, fragile but real, damaged but not broken. Maybe that was enough for now. Maybe they could build on broken things. "Stay," she said quietly. "Tonight, just tonight." "Are you sure?" "No, but I am asking anyway." Kael moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely. Stars were beginning to emerge through breaking clouds. They sat in silence, two broken people trying to figure out how to fit their jagged edges together without causing more wounds. It was not perfect, but it was honest. And maybe honest was the best foundation they could ask for. Kael returned to the stronghold alone 3 days later. He had stayed with Elara at the hunting shelter for one night, as she had asked. They had talked in fragmented conversations, circling around the heart of what hurt without quite landing on it. Then morning had come, and Elara had told him gently that she needed more time alone. "Not because I do not want you here," she had said, "but because I need to figure out who I am when you are not watching, when I am not performing Luna or mate or anything other than just Elara." Kael had understood, had respected it, even though leaving her felt like tearing his own heart out and placing it carefully in her hands with no guarantee she would keep it safe. But he had left, because respecting her autonomy mattered more than his comfort. Now he walked through the stronghold gates and felt every eye turn toward him. Whispers followed him through the corridors, the Alpha King who had confessed his failures, who had let his Luna walk away, who had returned without her and without answers. Marmin was waiting in Kael's private study when he arrived. "She did not come back with you," the old wolf observed. "No." "Did you find her safe?" "Yes, she is staying in the borderlands for now, processing everything." Marmin nodded slowly. "The council is growing restless. They want to know your plans for moving forward." "I have plans." Kael moved to his desk and pulled out a map of the surrounding territories. "I am organizing the search for Lyra Moonvei. Emmett Turlow and Rufus Bonner have agreed to lead separate teams. They will start at the last recorded sighting and expand outward." "That was 4 years ago. The trail will be cold." "I know. But we have to try." Marmin studied him for a long moment. "You are different since the council meeting. Quieter, more focused. Honesty has a way of clarifying priorities. Or destroying them. Sometimes destruction is necessary before rebuilding." Marmin sank into one of the chairs across from Kael's desk. For the first time in years, he looked his age, tired and weathered and carrying too many responsibilities. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Kael looked up sharply. "For what?" "For pushing the Lyra Moonvei exile 4 years ago, for not questioning the evidence more thoroughly, for prioritizing political stability over individual justice." Marmin's scarred hands tightened on the armrests. "I told myself we were protecting the pack, but really, we were protecting ourselves from the discomfort of dealing with grief that did not fit our comfortable narratives." "You were not the only one." "No, but I was the one with the most influence. I could have pushed back, could have demanded more investigation. Instead, I endorsed the exile because it was easier than doing the hard work of actually helping a wolf in pain. Kael sat down slowly. Why are you telling me this now? Because watching you take full responsibility for a failure you only partially own made me realize I have been hiding behind your youth for too long. You were inexperienced, yes, but I was supposed to guide you, and instead, I guided you toward expediency. We both made choices we regret. Yes, but you are at least trying to fix yours. I have just been hoping no one would notice mine. Silence settled between them. Kael thought about all the conversations they had had over the years, all the times Marmon had pushed him toward hard decisions, all the moments Kael had wondered if he was being tested or simply being set up to fail. Maybe it had been both. What do you want from me? Kael asked finally. Nothing. I just needed you to know that I see what you are doing, choosing honesty over politics, truth over convenience, and I respect it even if it makes my job harder. Your job. Keeping you alive, keeping the pack stable, keeping challengers at bay while you figure out how to lead with your heart instead of just your head. Kael smiled slightly despite himself. Is that what I am doing? Is it not? I suppose it is. Marmon stood, moving toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. For what it is worth, I think Elara will come back. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but she will come back. Because wolves do not walk away from bonds that strong unless they are completely broken, and yours is just fractured. How can you tell? Because you are still standing. If the bond had actually broken, you would know. You would feel it like losing a limb. Marmon left without waiting for a response. Kael sat alone in his study, the map of surrounding territories spread before him. He marked potential search routes, calculated distances, tried to imagine where Lyra might have gone after being exiled. But his mind kept drifting back to Elara, to the way she had looked sitting by the fire in the hunting shelter, exhausted and uncertain, and still somehow the strongest person he had ever met. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Pearl McGraw entered carrying a sealed letter. This just arrived from the northern border. It is marked urgent. Kael took the letter and broke the seal. His eyes scanned the contents rapidly, then stopped. Read again to make sure he had understood correctly. Call an emergency council session, he said quietly. Within the hour. Pearl's eyes widened. What happened? We found Lyra Moonvei. The council chamber filled quickly. Wolves entered in various states of dress, clearly pulled from other tasks. Speculation rippled through the assembled members. Kael stood at the head of the table and waited for silence. When every eye was on him, he spoke. I received word from Emmett Turlow's search party. They located Lyra Moonvei in a settlement near the northern mountains. She is alive. Relief and tension warred in the expressions around him. What is her condition? Ralph Turlow asked immediately, the healer in him taking over. The report says she is healthy. She has been living with a small pack of exiles and rogues, working as a healer actually. Murmurs of surprise. Elara had learned her healing skills somewhere. It made sense Lyra would have taught her. Has she been informed of our search? Clovis asked. Yes. Emmett approached her directly, identified himself as Nightborne Pack, and explained we were looking for her. And? Kael took a breath. She refused to return. The chamber erupted. Refused. On what grounds? She is still under exile order. She does not have a choice. Kael raised his hand for silence. Actually, she does. The exile order gave her the option to petition for return after a suitable period. 4 years qualifies. I am prepared to lift the order effective immediately if she chooses to come back. And if she does not choose? Marmon asked. Then I respect her decision. The exile was unjust. Forcing her return would compound the injustice. You are just going to let her refuse? Ephraim looked incredulous. Yes. What about Elara? Should she not have a say in whether her sister returns? Kael felt his chest tighten. Elara does not know yet. You have not told her. I received the message less than an hour ago. I called this meeting to inform the council before I send word to Elara. Clovis leaned forward. This changes everything. If Lyra Moonvei is alive and well, it undermines the entire narrative of your failure. You did not destroy her life, you just relocated it. That is not comfort, Kael said sharply. I still exiled her unjustly. The fact that she survived and built a life elsewhere does not erase the wrongness of what I did. But it does matter, Risno insisted. It matters politically. It matters in terms of pack perception. It matters for Elara's ability to forgive you. Forgiveness is not a political calculation. Everything is political when you are Alpha King. Kael slammed his hand on the table. The crack of impact silenced the room. Enough. Lyra Moonvei's fate is not a tool for managing my relationship with Elara. She is a person who was wronged, who survived despite us, who has built a life she apparently prefers to returning here. We will respect that. Even if it means Elara never knows her sister is alive, Harlan asked quietly. The question hit Kael like a physical blow. Because of course, Elara needed to know, deserved to know, but telling her meant potential complications he had not fully considered. I will tell Elara immediately, he said. She has the right to know, and she has the right to contact Lyra herself if she wishes. What happens after that is between them. And if Elara wants to leave the pack to be with her sister, Marmon's voice was gentle but firm. If the knowledge that Lyra is alive and well somewhere else makes Elara realize she prefers that life to the one here. Kael felt something crack inside him. Then I let her go. Just like that. Just like that. Because keeping her here against her would make me exactly the kind of Alpha King who exiled Lyra in the first place. And I refuse to be that person again. The council was quiet. Kael could see them processing the implications. An Alpha King without a Luna, a mate bond formally severed, political vulnerability that could last years. But also, a leader who chose principle over convenience, who valued individual autonomy over pack cohesion, who learned from his failures instead of repeating them. I will send word to Elara tonight, Kael said. I will provide her with Lyra's location and leave the decision of what to do with that information entirely up to her. If she chooses to go to her sister, I will not stop her. If she chooses to bring Lyra back here, I will welcome them both. And if she chooses neither, if she decides this revelation changes nothing, I will respect that too. You are gambling everything on her choosing you, Clovis observed. No, I am refusing to gamble at all. I am simply being honest and accepting whatever consequences follow. Marmon stood slowly. The council will support your decision, but Kael, you should know that if Elara leaves permanently, there will be pressure to formally sever the bond and consider other matches. I know. And you are prepared for that. No, but I will face it when the time comes. The meeting adjourned shortly after. Council members filed out quietly, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to calculating. Kael remained alone in the chamber, staring at the letter from Emmett. Lyra Moonvei alive, healthy, building a life for herself away from pack politics and painful memories. He should feel relief, should feel like this vindicated something, proved that his decision had not been as destructive as he feared. But all he felt was the weight of what he still needed to do. He needed to tell Elara, needed to give her information that would change everything, and needed to accept that the change might lead her away from him permanently. Kael pulled out parchment and began to write. Elara. I have news about Lyra. She is alive. The search party found her in a northern settlement. She is healthy and working as a healer. She has built a life there and has refused to return to Nightborne territory. I am sending you her exact location with this letter. What you choose to do with that information is entirely your decision. If you want to go to her, I will not stop you. If you want to bring her back here, she will be welcomed. If you need time to process this before making any choice, take all the time you need. I know this changes things. I know it raises new questions about what you want and where you belong. And I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will support it without resentment. You asked me once if I would make the same decision again. I told you I would not because I am different now. This is proof of that difference. I am giving you complete freedom, even knowing it might mean losing you. Because your autonomy matters more than my comfort. Your healing matters more than my happiness. Be well, be safe, and know that wherever you go, whatever you choose, I love you. Kael. He sealed the letter and called for a messenger. Clyde Haskins's daughter, Leona, arrived within minutes. Take this to the borderlands, Kael said, handing her the letter along with a detailed map. Find the Luna, give this to her directly. Wait for a response if she offers one, but do not pressure her. Leona nodded and left immediately. Kael stood alone in his study, watching the sun set through the window. Somewhere in the borderlands, Elara was about to receive news that would reshape her understanding of the past 4 years. And somewhere in the northern mountains, Lyra was living a life she had chosen after being denied choice. Both women deserved better than what they had received from him. All he could do now was try to give them the freedom to decide what came next, even if that freedom destroyed him in the process. Elara received the letter at dusk, on the 5th day of her solitude. She had been sitting by a small fire, preparing a simple meal, when she heard footsteps approaching through the underbrush. Her body tensed instinctively, but she recognized the scent before the figure emerged. Pack, Nightborne specifically. Leona Haskins stepped into the clearing, slightly out of breath, a sealed letter in her hand. Luna, she said formally, I have a message from the Alpha King. Elara's heart stuttered. Part of her had been waiting for this. Part of her had been dreading it. She took the letter with hands that trembled slightly. Does he expect a response? She asked. Only if you wish to give one. He said I should not pressure you. Elara nodded. Thank you, Leona. You can return to the stronghold. Tell Kael I received his message. Leona hesitated. Luna, if I may, the Alpha King has been different since you left. Quieter, more deliberate. Whatever is in that letter, I think it cost him something to write. Everything cost him something, Elara said softly. That is part of the problem. Leona departed without further comment. Elara stared at the sealed letter for a long time. The wax bore Kael's personal mark. The parchment was good quality but not ostentatious. Everything about it screamed careful consideration. Finally, she broke the seal and read. The first line made her breath catch. I have news about Lyra. She is alive. Elara read the rest of the letter 3 times, her eyes burning, her chest tight with emotions she could not name. Lyra was alive. Alive. After 4 years of believing her sister was somewhere unreachable, somewhere unknowable, suddenly there was a location, coordinates, a specific place Elara could go. The letter included a small map with the northern settlement marked clearly. Kael had even noted the safest route, the estimated travel time, potential dangers along the way. He had given her everything she needed to leave, and explicitly told her he would not stop her if she did. Elara's hands shook as she set the letter down. This changed everything. Everything she had been processing, every decision she had been circling around, suddenly had to be recalculated. Because Lyra was alive. And Elara could go to her. She stood and began packing the small clearing. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could leave tonight. Could reach the northern settlement in 3 days if she pushed hard. Could finally see Lyra again, embrace her, apologize for not searching harder, for believing the lie of abandonment. But Lyra had refused to return to Nightborne territory, had built a life elsewhere and chosen to stay there. What did that mean? Was it anger at the exile, fear of the pack, or had she genuinely found something better in her new home? And what did it say about Elara that her first instinct was not simply to rush to Lyra, but to think about what leaving would mean for Kael? She pulled out the letter and read it again, focused this time on the final paragraphs. Your autonomy matters more than my comfort. Your healing matters more than my happiness. Those words sat in her chest like stones, heavy and real and impossible to ignore. Kael was letting her go, completely, without conditions or expectations. was giving her the freedom to choose her sister over him, to rebuild the family he had helped destroy, to walk away from the bond that had never quite settled. And somehow, that freedom made leaving feel impossible. Elara sat back down by the fire and let herself cry, big, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for Lyra for the years they had lost, cried for Kael for the weight he had carried in silence, cried for herself for the impossible choice she now faced. Because it was a choice, not an obligation, not a manipulation, just a simple, honest choice between two futures. She could go to Lyra, could rebuild their relationship in a place untainted by pack politics and painful memories, could start fresh without the shadow of Kael's failure hanging over everything. Or she could return to Kael, could claim the bond that had been waiting for 3 years, could choose to build something new on the foundation of brutal honesty they had finally achieved. Both options were valid. Both held different kinds of pain and promise. Elara pulled her knees to her chest and watched the fire burn down to embers. The moon rose, full and bright. She could feel her wolf stirring beneath her skin, restless and uncertain. What did she want? Not what she should want. Not what would hurt less or cost less or make the most sense politically. What did her heart actually want? The answer came slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night, subtle at first, then growing brighter until it was undeniable. She wanted both. She wanted Lyra in her life, wanted to reconnect, to rebuild, to heal the wounds of separation. But she also wanted Kael, wanted the man who had tracked her through rain and wilderness just to ensure her safety, who had confessed his failures publicly rather than continue hiding, who was currently offering her complete freedom even though it might destroy him. The question was not which one to choose. The question was whether she could have both, and whether Kael would understand that claiming him did not mean abandoning Lyra. Elara stood decisively. She gathered her supplies, kicked dirt over the fire, and began walking. Not toward the northern settlement. Toward the stronghold. She arrived just before midnight. The gates were unmanned at this hour, the watch stationed in shifts that left brief windows of unguarded access. Elara slipped through easily and made her way through the familiar corridors. She found Kael in his study, as she had known she would. He was bent over maps, marking routes with careful precision. He looked exhausted, drawn, like he had not slept properly in days. He did not hear her enter. Elara watched him for a moment, studied the way his shoulders carried tension even in private, the way his hands moved with purpose despite obvious fatigue, the way he checked and rechecked coordinates, triple verifying information before committing it to paper. This was the man who had exiled her sister, but it was also the man who had sent search parties to find her, who had given Elara every piece of information needed to leave him, who was currently planning routes he might never use because they might help someone he had wronged. Flawed, broken, trying. "You are going to wear a hole in that map if you keep at it," Elara said quietly. Kael's head snapped up. For a moment he just stared at her as if he could not quite believe she was real. Then he stood slowly, his chair scraping against stone. "Elara." Her name sounded like a prayer. "You came back." "I came back," she agreed. "Why?" "Because I read your letter, because I thought about what I wanted, and because I realized that choosing you does not mean choosing against Lyra." Kael moved around the desk but stopped several feet away, maintaining the careful distance they had established. "You should go to her. You should see your sister." "I will, but not alone." Confusion flickered across his face. "I do not understand." "I want you to come with me," Elara said. "I want you to meet Lyra. I want you to apologize to her directly, face to face. And I want her to see that the man who exiled her is not the same man standing here now." "Elara," she refused to return. "She might not want to see me." "Then we will find out, together. But I am not choosing between you and her anymore. I am choosing both. I am choosing to build bridges instead of walls." Kael's expression shifted, hope carefully guarded. "What about the bond?" Elara took a step forward. "What about it?" "You said you were not ready to claim it." I was not ready to claim a bond built on lies, but you have given me truth. Painful, devastating, honest truth, and that is enough for me to try. She took another step forward. I love you, Kael. I have loved you since the moment I found that letter and watched you carry your guilt with such silent grace. I have loved you through anger and betrayal and confusion, and I choose to keep loving you, even though it is complicated and messy and will probably hurt sometimes. Kael's breath caught. You do not have to decide this now. You can take more time. I have taken enough time. I have processed and analyzed and circled around the truth, and the truth is simple. I want to be with you. I want to claim our bond, and I want to do it with full knowledge of who you are and what you have done. The bond between them surged, strong and sudden, searching for completion. Elara gasped at the intensity but did not pull away. Do you feel that? She asked. Yes. That is our wolves, ready to settle, ready to complete what should have happened 3 years ago, but this time it is happening with honesty, with full knowledge, with choice. Kael moved closer, finally closing the distance between them. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she did not, he cupped her face gently. Are you sure? He whispered. Yes. The bond settled. Not violently, not with the dramatic snap of a connection forced into place, but gently, quietly, like puzzle pieces finding their natural alignment after years of being slightly off-center. Elara felt it in every cell of her body, the rightness of it, the completion, the sense of finally being whole in a way she had not realized she was missing. Kael's eyes widened. Elara. I know. The bond. I know. They stood there, foreheads touching, breathing in sync. The weight of 3 years of partial connection finally released, the uncertainty replaced with certainty, the fear replaced with foundation. After a long moment, Elara pulled back slightly. We leave for the northern settlement tomorrow, she said. We. Yes, both of us. You are going to face Lyra. You are going to give her the apology she deserves, and then you are going to respect whatever choice she makes about whether to forgive you. Kael nodded slowly. And if she does not forgive me? Then we live with that, together, because forgiveness is not required for healing. Acknowledgement is, truth is, and you have given both. I do not deserve you. Probably not, but you have me anyway. Elara smiled for the first time in days. It felt strange on her face, fragile but real. Kael pulled her into an embrace. She melted into it, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. The bond hummed between them, settled and certain. I love you, he said into her hair. I love you too, complicated and imperfect and entirely on purpose. They stood like that for a long time. Two broken people who had finally figured out how to fit their jagged edges together without causing new wounds. Outside the study window, the moon continued its arc across the sky. In the northern mountains, Lyra slept in her chosen home, unaware that tomorrow would bring visitors from a past she had thought closed. And in the stronghold, an Alpha King and his Luna stood together, facing an uncertain future with the only thing they had ever really needed. Truth. The journey north had been difficult. Lyra had been shocked to see them arrive, angry, initially, when Kael had introduced himself. But she had listened to his apology, had heard him take full responsibility without deflection or excuse, had watched him offer to lift the exile formally and seen him respect her decision to remain in her chosen home. She had not forgiven him, not yet, maybe not ever. But she had agreed to maintain contact with Elara, had embraced her sister and cried, and apologized for not finding a way to send word that she was alive, had explained that the exile order had said any contact with Nightborne pack members would result in permanent banishment from all territories, so she had chosen silence to preserve the option of return. They had talked for 3 days, Elara and Lyra, rebuilding what had been broken, finding new ways to be sisters when so much had changed. And then Elara had returned to the stronghold with Kael, had chosen to be Luna not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to build something meaningful with him. Now, 3 months later, they stood in the council chamber together. The bond between them was strong and settled. Elara had taken her place as Luna officially, had begun implementing changes to grief protocols that would have saved Lyra years ago. And Kael had learned to lead not just with authority, but with compassion, had discovered that strength sometimes meant admitting weakness, that power sometimes meant giving it away. The Northern Territories have sent their formal alliance agreement, Marmon said, passing documents across the table. They are impressed with the changes you have made to pack structure, particularly the revised grief protocols. Kael glanced at Elara, who smiled slightly. Those were Elara's doing, he said. She understands what wolves in mourning need better than any council ever did. Still, Marmon continued, the fact that you implemented them over council objections shows growth. The other packs are noticing. Good, maybe they will implement similar changes. The meeting continued, covering territory disputes and trade agreements and the dozens of small decisions that kept pack life functioning. But now, Elara sat beside Kael during these sessions, offered perspective he might have missed, challenged assumptions gently but firmly. They had become partners, not just mates, but genuine equals in leadership. When the meeting adjourned, they walked back to their shared chambers together. The bond hummed between them, constant and comfortable. I received a letter from Lyra today, Elara said as they entered their private space. How is she? Well, she is thinking about visiting in spring, just for a few days. She wants to see the changes we have made. Kael stopped walking. She is considering coming back. Considering, not promising, but the fact that she is thinking about it feels like progress. It does. They moved to the window overlooking the training grounds. Young wolves were sparring below, their movements fluid and joyful. The next generation, learning to be strong without sacrificing compassion. Do you ever regret it? Elara asked quietly. Choosing honesty over political convenience, it cost you so much. No, Kael's answer was immediate. It cost me, yes, but it also gave me you. Gave me the ability to look at myself in the mirror without shame. Gave me a foundation to build on instead of a facade to maintain. Even when the council pushes back. Especially then, because I know I am making choices I can live with. Choices that honor who I want to be rather than who I was afraid of becoming. Elara leaned into him. I am proud of you. I am proud of us. For surviving. For choosing each other despite every reason not to. For building something real out of something broken. The moon was rising, full and bright. Kael felt its pull, felt his wolf stir beneath his skin. Beside him, Elara's breathing changed, matching the rhythm of transformation. Run with me, he asked. Always. They shifted together, two wolves. Bound by choice, by truth, by love that had survived honesty. And they ran through the forest, side by side, their howls joining in harmony under the moonlight. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole.